Hello there. Some of you may remember that over the last couple of weeks, every now and then I've been dipping into my Shakespeare, or more correctly, my mother's Shakespeare, reading from her one of her many collections of the complete works. I've done a couple of speeches from Romeo and Juliet. Uh, I can't actually remember the other ones I've done. Upcoming ones I'm thinking of are doing something from Much Ado About Nothing, doing something from Macbeth, doing the great speech from Henry V, which I think I've already done, but I'll do it again. And today I'm going to have a look at possibly the greatest speech of them all, which is the To Be or Not to Be speech from Hamlet. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone, Hamlet is basically one of the most famous pieces of literature in any form ever. And quite rightly, it's Shakespeare's longest play, which says something. It takes hours to actually perform a full text. But nonetheless, just in case you can't remember the general story, it basically follows Hamlet, who's Prince of Denmark, seeking revenge on his uncle Claudius, who killed Hamlet's father in order to seize the throne of Denmark and marry Hamlet's mother, called Gertrude. That's the general gist of it. There's a whole bunch of stuff goes on, and as you would imagine, complexities and all manner of stuff. But it's a story that was written, I think, in the early 1600s, so early 17th century. And it's a story that has basically resonated forever. It's been performed pretty much constantly somewhere in the world from from when it was written. Some of the most notable performers of our age have played Hamlet on stage and on screen. Just on stage, just off the top of my head, with Sir Laurence Olivier, Peter O'Toole, Richard Burton, more recently with David Tennant, Tom Hiddleston, Jude Law. It's basically a magnet for performers, and it's also very easy to overperform it. It's basically charting a kind of slow descent into general madness. It's a tragedy for a reason. It's also been adapted and filmed. I mean, the film versions are the ones I kind of know a bit more about. And then you're talking about probably the most famous, really, is probably Laurence Olivier's original version, I think in 1946. Something like that. But again, it's been filmed several times. In my mind, most successfully by Kenneth Branagh in 1996, in which he kind of updated it, changed its location, shot beautifully in 70mm, and it's the only filmed version of the complete text. So it runs to about 4 hours. Sadly, it's not available anywhere. It might be available on one of the streaming services. I must check. But if you're looking for a really good, high quality, high definition, or even a 4K version, there were some mumblings that it might be a 4K version. Then you're out of luck. I think there's an old DVD of it somewhere. But it's also been spoofed many times. Probably the most famous, the one that leaps to mind, is Arnold Schwarzenegger does a brilliant spoof of it in his film The Last Action Hero, which, if you've not watched Last Action Hero, you really should, because it's a really brilliant film anyway. There's a brilliant little pastiche in there where our child hero kind of falls asleep in class when they're talking about Hamlet, and he dreams about his favourite action hero playing Hamlet, and naturally, mayhem ensues. I won't spoil it. It's on YouTube, so if you've not looked it up, look up Last Action Hero Hamlet. It's well worth it. Probably the most famous recent example of an adaptation is The Lion King. The Lion King is pretty much the same plot. The king's brother plots to kill the king and seize the throne for himself. And then, the boy, I've forgotten the name of the boy, the young king, Simba, that's it. He goes to the wilderness but then comes back and, takes the throne back. But Lion King's got a happy ending. This one doesn't. But nonetheless, Lion King's probably the most famous example. Although, the William Shakespeare original sadly doesn't feature many singing animals, and Hakuna Matata definitely isn't in the original text. Having said all that and set the introduction, I will now read the speech. Try and set the scene. Sorry, I'll move that a wee bit. I'll try and. So we're in Act 3, Scene 1. It's a room in the castle. There's a bit of banter, various scenes. Now, a lot of this text may be unfamiliar. Everybody knows the opening line, to be or not to be, that is the question. Some people know the second line, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. But the vast majority of people, that's it. That's their knowledge of the speech. The actual whole speech is an incredible meditation on choice and also life and death. Basically, Hamlet is wondering, is there much point in going on? He's aware that this is going to end badly, but then thinks about, well, what lies beyond? Are we afraid of death because we don't know what lies beyond? And in this speech, there are a couple of phrases that will leap out at you that we now use all the time or have been referenced in other films, or have become part of the English language. I'll highlight them at the end. I'll try and read the whole thing. Bear with me, my eyes aren't what they were. Okay, so this is, I'm never quite sure whether it's a soliloquy or a monologue, but here we go. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's consummate, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might have his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but the dread of something after death? The undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with a pale cast of thought, and enterprise of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the same name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. Then Ophelia enters and the play continues. Alright, so there's no point in me analysing this line by line, word by word. I will just point out a couple of comments there. Right, so what Hamlet's basically saying is, why don't we just embrace death? And the reason we don't embrace death is because we don't know what lies beyond. We'd rather suffer day to day, week to week, than go to the sweet embrace of death, because we do not know, and there's no escape. So I'll point out a couple of the phrases which you may have picked up. To sleep, perchance to dream. Right. So what you're saying is, the air is effectively saying to sleep, but you're going to dream, and the worry here is what dreams may come, and that's what he says later. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. And then he uses a phrase that we use commonly in English: when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. So what he's saying is, the dreams that may come once we've kicked the bucket, we don't know what they're going to be. Aye, there's the rub. And then he talks about all the suffering you might have through your life. Bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the pangs of despised love. Now that's a very good phrase. Now there's then some words that I don't really quite know. Bodkin, fardels, contumely. I must look them up. I'm never quite sure what they mean. But then comes the phrase that I think Star Trek fans will recognise, which he says, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will. So the phrase, the undiscovered country, Star Trek fans may recognise that as the subtitle of Star Trek 6, in which one of the Klingons early on in the film says, you haven't experienced Shakespeare until you've read him in the original Klingon, which is a great line. So really, I'm not going to go over the rest of this. A nice little phrase at the end when Ophelia enters. And he says, nymph in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. Now, I'm not quite sure what orisons are. He's basically asking Ophelia to remember him. He knows this is going to end badly. So that's that. It's worth a read yourself. There's no point in me going into any more detail on that. It's well documented everywhere in the world. Every English undergraduate, pretty much most school students have at one point wrestled with that speech. In fact, they've wrestled with the whole play. As I said, it's Shakespeare's longest. But it's well worth having a look at. And if nothing else comes of this, at least go and look up the Arnold Schwarzenegger spoof from Last Action Hero, because it's really good. It's worth a look. Anyway, that's pretty much. I'm going to wind this one up as we're nearly heading to 15 minutes. If you've liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't liked it, fine. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best here. So anyway, lots of love, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll catch up with you next time. Mikey out. Bye.